In recent years, policymakers and academics have witnessed the vast amount of accounting and auditing research that is relevant and useful to policymaking decisions. They have recognized the challenges of transferring the knowledge from this research to policymakers, and they have noted the potential benefits of evidence-informed policymaking. A major challenge for knowledge transfer is a gap between the main interest of academics who produce knowledge and policymakers who act on knowledge. In the inner circle depicted here, academics produce knowledge through inquiry, with the goal to augment knowledge and solve problems. In the outer circle, policymakers identify a problem, identify relevant knowledge, adapt the knowledge, implement interventions, and evaluate outcomes. How can this gap be closed? Academics can synthesize the knowledge and develop tools to tailor and transfer it to policymakers. In looking for a knowledge transfer approach, we are not reinventing the wheel. We propose adapting a model of evidence-informed policymaking. The model has been researched and institutionalized. It is applied in public health policy, education policy, and legal guidelines, and other domains. The foundation of this approach comes from systematic academic knowledge transfer practices in evidence-based medicine, using research syntheses. We sought to test this research synthesis approach in audit standard setting. How does this research synthesis approach look different from what exists in auditing? It requires academics and standard-setting task forces to interact early and often. They scope a specific question and develop consensus on what research evidence is able to say about the issue. They come to agree on parameters for gathering evidence. Then, academics explicitly grade the quality of the evidence and report its implications for the very specific question. Importantly, this is an iterative knowledge transfer process that is systematic, effective, and efficient. The purpose is not to provide one right answer to the question under debate, but instead to provide an informative input with systematic and comprehensive consideration of the best available evidence from academic research within the typical time frame of 10 to 12 weeks between board meetings. If audit standard setting implemented a research synthesis protocol like the evidence-based medicine model, what would it look like? We simulated that world. We identified a historical issue that was debated in audit standard setting, a question that had potential to be informed by academic research evidence. We followed the research synthesis protocol and brought on board experienced people in key roles, and we kept to tight timelines to hold meetings and produce our deliverables. As the researchers, we took on the role of producing the research synthesis. We worked with a former standard setter who had served as the executive director of the International Federation of Accountants and the technical director of the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board. He took on the role of professional facilitator and helped us assemble a standard setters subcommittee. They took on the role of liaison between academics and standard setters. Each of these former standard setters had experience in developing the standard that we used in our simulation, the group audit standard. Next, we'll give you a glimpse of the simulation.
We are all driven by our own experiences and biases, and as audit partners, we remember the mistake we missed in our first year as an audit partner or our last year as an audit manager, and we got away with it. We learned from it, but in every audit after that, we tend to focus on making sure that problem never happens again. And we've all been there, I think, and we all live by that model. I think the auditing standards setter's question, Steve, is always, is it possible to parallel this discussion to the medical profession, which is the one that you and Chris and I spent the first year looking at? Is it possible to equate what happens in that environment with what happens in this environment? And I think that that's an open question, and I don't think we know the answer until you list the results of your research in 8 or 12 weeks' time.
What do standard setters think about when they're using terms that the researcher might not understand?
Desirable to me includes cost, disruption, communications, all these things that are outside of whether the audit opinion was correct or not.
There is a perception and expectation gap out there that I think if one were to line up the procedures on one side that auditors would do in a sole responsibility versus what is done or should be done in divided responsibility, I'm not sure that there is that much difference in terms of the fundamentals of an audit, but there is a difference in perception in terms of the level of work that is being done. That gets to John's point. Is there a either real or perceived notion that in a sole responsibility scenario that the auditor is really doing that much more that would contribute to the effectiveness of the audit?
We need to not just look at the auditing literature by itself, or even more narrowly, the little bit of group audit, precise on-point literature that exists even today. We're going to look at analogies to literature that go beyond auditing that would suggest whether various approaches, both from a communications to the reader perspective and internal communications between the group auditor and the component auditor, would occur better in one setting or the other. It would be highly likely that the answer to the question would be a better component audit would be carried out under the sole responsibility regime. Now, why would it be a better component audit? Well, it would be a better component audit because evidence thoroughness would likely be higher under an accountability relationship. What we're talking about is an entire suite of processes that auditors would actually undertake that would lead them to being more thorough, being more attentive, using stronger mental capacity, and feeling the pressure being used in the good sense of the word to actually come through with a appropriate audit opinion that would contribute to the overall audit.
Would having this product, this report, as an input be informative to the decision-making process or to the conversations?
Yes, I think it made me kind of frame my thinking about why sole responsibility produces a better result than I otherwise would have, because I think this whole idea of bringing the accountability literature into it made me really think about it. Well, what is it that really makes it better? I don't necessarily accept your hypothesis, but it helped my thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that would be true if you used this approach in any research question. You're not necessarily going to get it exactly right. It's the stimulation of thinking.
It would have made us think deeper. I think just on its own, the literature survey of what was available in the audit space, I don't think that would have made any difference. That kind of psychological approach to it would have made a difference. in my view, because that would have said that, well, we can't look at this in just two legal frameworks, because I think all we were talking about at that stage is two legal frameworks. We were not talking about behavior of individuals.